Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the NARM Training Institute. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Hi, Transforming Trauma listeners. Do you want to join the international NARM community in support of trauma-informed care? If so, please consider joining us in 2023 to become trained in the neuroaffective relational model. The Level 1 online NARM Basics training is designed for helping professionals in a variety of fields, such as mental health professionals, substance abuse counselors, educators, doctors, nurses, other healthcare providers, coaches, and more. If you are a licensed mental health practitioner, you can join the Level 2 NARM Therapist training. This Level 2 training is a clinical training designed for licensed mental health professionals, current mental health graduate students, and active clinical interns and trainees, where you will get trained in a comprehensive developmental framework and clinical approach for resolving the long-term impacts of ACEs and CPTSD. For more information on these trainings and to apply, please visit narmtraining.com/schedule. We hope you will join us in 2023 for learning how to transform trauma. Today's episode is a conversation between NARM senior faculty Brad Kammer, Stefanie Klein, and Marcia Black as they reflect on the developments of the NARM community, as well as what they are learning as NARM trainers and consultants in 2022. Marcia Black is a licensed clinical psychologist and has been in private practice for over 35 years in San Francisco and the East Bay Area. Stefanie Klein is a licensed clinical social worker and has spent 22 years in her Los Angeles private practice. Lastly, Brad Kammer is a licensed marriage and family therapist and professional clinical counselor. He is a body-mind psychotherapist and the NARM Training Director, teaching NARM and working with complex trauma internationally. Please enjoy this conversation between Brad, Stefanie, and Marcia. All right, I'm so happy to be sitting here with Brad Kammer, Marcia Black, and Stefanie Klein. Welcome all of you to Transforming Trauma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's been a year since we've all four been together in this context. And so I'm excited to hear from each of you more about what we've been learning, in our respective roles in the NARM, as well as what's coming up in the coming year. So let's have a conversation.
Great.
Love to.
All right. So I wondered if we could start with Brad. Would you mind kind of sharing where you'd like to start?
Yeah, I just look forward to this opportunity for us to be together. This is the NARM faculty, and we're kind of the backbone of this organization. We're the ones that are doing a lot of teaching, a lot of consulting, a lot of mentorship. And the three of us don't have a lot of chance to sit down and talk to each other. We're old friends. We care about each other. And we've been so busy this year that we haven't had, I think I'm repeating what I said last year, but we haven't had much of an opportunity to sit together as humans. And I love these humans. So want to just see where we're at and, reflect together. It's kind of part of us building an intentional organization to have some self-reflection, self-awareness about learning and challenges, but also celebrating the really amazing things that are happening each week, each month in our institute. So just happy to spend a little time at the end of this year to reflect together.
Wonderful. And Marcia, how about you?
Yeah, as I was anticipating sitting with all of you, what really hit me was just a lot of deep appreciation for the whole NARM community, for Brad and Stefanie and Larry and all of you for what we've been able to create, but also the way that students have shown up in our trainings, bringing their hearts and willingness to be demos for learning, and the way people have brought enthusiasm and dedication to the book launch and writing reviews. And I just feel such gratitude. And the TAs who've shown up in so many ways to support our trainings. We really have been, I think Stefanie once said, building the plane as we fly it. And what hit me the most is just wanting to convey my deep gratitude for all of the pieces that have helped support us being able to bring this mission of healing out into the wider global community. So I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude right now and hope that comes across in our podcast today.
Thank you, Marcia. And Stefanie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Brad and Marcia are sharing, especially like the feeling that this has been such a labor of love, really, creating the NARM Institute and building it and, all the lessons we've learned along the way. And it's interesting to be meeting once a year and reflecting on the development of everything. This is a model for working with developmental and complex trauma. And I'm feeling into right now the developmental stages of NARM and of the Institute and of our relationships with each other. I think we all probably feel like we wouldn't be here without each other. Like, we've really supported each other to get to this point. And, bringing this work out into the world and building an institute is not an easy task. And it's such an important task. And so, like Brad and Marcia, I just really appreciate our partnerships with each other.
Thank you, Stephanie. And that leads in beautifully to where I was hoping to kind of dive into this conversation. And that's thinking about how the NARM community has really grown since we're all together last year. So I wonder who would like to kind of chime in about how you see the NARM community has grown in the last year.
Well, I have a question for Stephanie, actually, and this might be part of what launches us into this conversation. Do you have a sense developmentally where you feel like the NARM Institute is?
Wait, so am I supposed to think the critical stages of development here? How old are we? I don't know. It's like sometimes I look at it like a relationship. We're definitely not in the honeymoon phase, where everything's just like, oh, I'm in love with this model. I'm in love with this work. Where I feel like we're in the working through phase in a lot of ways. I feel like we're really holding the complexity of being an institute, being a business that has to function. But, how do we hold that all? How do we balance that all with our values that are NARM aligned, to be, relational and to be mentorship based and to really bring these, we keep saying top notch trainings to people, in ways that they can really take this amazing model and amazing information out there. But we still have to function as a business and as an organization, as an institute. So, yeah, like if I think about it, I feel like there's a lot of working through happening right now and really figuring out who we are, which is, as we all know in relationships, that's tough work. And it's also really rewarding. Did that answer your question, Brad?
Yeah, it totally did. It was great. And I just think about the thing that I value so much about the two of you, and I hope that I'm part of this too, is, just the way that both of you are so grounded, down to earth, lead with integrity,
Mhm.
and that we can even have these conversations
Hmm.
because, I can imagine a student coming to NARM and, oftentimes people idealize the model, they idealize us as the teachers. And, we like to walk the talk as much as we can here, and that we're not finished products.
No way.
Yeah, we have our own learning process, and the organization, the community has its own learning process, its own challenges. And I think one of the things that people wouldn't know about the three of us is just how much we really are there to support each other so that we can hold this complexity, because as much as it's so rewarding and we're going to talk about some of the really incredible things that we want to celebrate, there's also pain involved in fear,
Mhm.
pushing against our personal edges, committing to this kind of work impacts us in other ways. So all of these things I think also are part of us increasing our own capacity, both individually and in relationship and as part of this community. Marcia, I wonder if you had.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question, and what came up for me was the theme of duality and of holding the tension of the opposites, and that individuation for the individual and for the organization involves being able to hold both sides of a dilemma. And there's so many aspects of that. We have the 50-50 that we talk about in NARM with, our side and the students, or we talk about structure versus process, or, adult and child consciousness, and that we're holding both. And I feel like in the organization, along with what Stephanie was saying, we are growing in a way that we have to have a container, a structure, and yet one that just supports the mission and the deep heartfulness that we all came to it wanting to further. And I feel like that's really a lot of what we've been working with, is how to continue to support the organization being healthy and staying true to our mission, which is just a dialectic really in a lot of ways. And I I feel like we work with it internally within ourselves. I know for myself, I want to prepare and then I go, I'm just going to go show up as me, and working back and forth between in my teaching and my consults, or even in the webinar I did with Larry, the kind of tension between structure and fluidity. And I feel like we've done a great job of staying really aware of it and reflecting on it and supporting each other in our own growth edges where we come up against our own strategies on either side of those dualities. And I think the organization is stronger for it and still growing.
I just wanted to throw in that, we were kind of reflecting on this in a way this weekend. We were in the online basics training. Marcia and Emily were there. Brad wasn't there. But in our TA group meetings, we were talking about so much of how all of these layers are really made up of the same thing, all of these layers of mentorship. So, like what the students are struggling with, the edges that they're facing is really a version of what the TAs are struggling with in terms of learning how to show up in their roles, which is really a version of what we're showing up in, on the mentor level, whether it's in teaching or mentoring and how we show up and are impacted in those roles. And now, right now, we're reflecting on it on the organizational level as well. But it's really just versions of the same thing, which to me is actually really comforting.
Thank you, Stephanie, and Brad and Marcia. You're kind of already talking about it, but I'm curious from each of you how you see the NARM community having grown in the context of what you're saying right here.
I guess I've spent so much time this year mentoring. It's like feels like that's really, what this role is, teaching and mentoring so much. And one of the ways that I've just really been feeling into the growth of the community is through the work that we're doing with different people who are coming for active coaching, the active coaching groups, the large group case consults, the feeling of community in those groups and mutual support as people are learning and growing, sharing about their clients, being vulnerable to explore what's happening internally in their work, what's happening internally for them, being vulnerable in the active coaching groups and exploring deep material that then helps them become, stronger clinicians, more effective in their work. And then just the general feeling of community and support in these groups. And I don't know, sometimes I think the feeling of community is also growing in relationship to some of what's happening in the larger world. And it's just continues to seem more and more important to have a community of people who can come together and be really real and be really human when there's so many things going on in the world that don't feel as human as we might like them to be. So I feel like the NARM community is really providing a place for humanity, like a little fortress of humanity for people. And I really feel a lot of investment from the students, from the TAs, in being a part of that.
I'm wondering, what are some of the highlights of the learning and those growing edges that you're talking about?
I know that Marcia has some highlights.
I can think of some really big highlights we've had this year. In fact, I will share another one later, but I would like to really pass the baton to our fearless leader here because for me, I could feel emotional saying this. One of the biggest highlights was the launch of the book and being invited to speak to the book launch party on behalf of Brad and Larry for this amazing gift, really to the whole NARM community, but also way beyond to people who barely knew before about the NARM community, because it really is going to further the mission of bringing NARM in where people couldn't take a training or, be part of even, the inner circle or any of that, to have that book. And it meant a lot to me because I've known Brad for many years and we've been in the NARM journey with Stefanie for 10 years. And so to have this book come out was just incredible, just an incredible thing for me. And I'm so really happy for that accomplishment. And it just came out in Audible. So, Brad, I just would love to hear you speak about what it's meant to you, because it really is the highlight of the year, in my view, of NARM.
Definitely.
Thank you both. I mean, I could speak for many hours here about how much Marcia and Stephanie were in this whole process. I mean, even from practical ways of Marcia giving me a space to write, and Stephanie, being able to bounce off things, and Marcia editing, and Stephanie, helping me unpack some of these concepts. And so it was just a wonderful collaborative process, and really feel like the whole community really was part of this book. I mean, I say that in the book, but just so many ideas started coming together for me as I was teaching and doing consults. I mean, you should see my desk here. I have so many sticky notes because as I'm doing consults or teaching or active coaching, these ideas start coming together for me, and I jot them down, and then that becomes something that I am able to really kind of put into, the curriculum or put into this book. So I was thinking before when you asked this question, Emily, about like the developmental process this year of NARM. I like to use analogies. And so I'm a big music person. I like to see live music. And I love live music when it's a nobody band. Like you're in this like restaurant and there's a band playing, and all of a sudden it captures your attention. And there's literally 10 people listening, or like really small, hole in the wall clubs that this band just takes over the whole club, and there's only 20 or 50 people there, but it just feels like you're having this really incredible experience. And then, the band starts getting a little bit more following, and they have to move to a little bit larger clubs, a few hundred people. And then one day you're in a Walmart and you hear a song come over, and it's that band that you've been following since that restaurant when it was just, people eating dinner and listening to you kind of, or talking over you. And I feel like that's kind of what's been happening this year a little bit, just from a practical place. Like I no longer know every single person in our NARM community. I used to know every single person by name, by face, and that no longer is true anymore. So it's like we're now no longer in those small little intimate clubs. We're in a little bit of a larger, and there's loss to it in some way because there's magic that happens, and there's incredible experiences that Stephanie, Marcia, and I could tell you a lot about, some great experiences that we've had and some funny ones in these small little groups of 15 or 20, 30 people. But on the other hand, it does provide more access to this work that is really the mission of this, and to bring it out more. So the book was part of that vision. It was that we have to get this work out. The three of us have been therapists for a long time, and we work one-on-one generally in private practice, all three of us. And how do we take what's happening in the room with people where they've been living with these patterns for 20, 40, 60 years, and having really incredible shifts and having these sacred moments of transformation and healing? And how do we take that and share that? And so, primarily as an institute, we're focused on therapists and helping professionals. But even in our trainings, there's something that happens, the collective format as well, that we as human beings ourselves are getting healing just by being exposed to the training and being part of this community. So the book was kind of a way that a lot of this came together. And I do feel like there's a lot of the magic that got captured in the book. You can never fully capture from what's happening in the live experiences, but I think we did the best we could. And it has been really touching to see all the support. And I mean, reading those reviews the first couple of weeks after it got launched, I mean, I was in tears many times reading some of these reviews about how much this work has changed people's life. And this book speaks to things that people have been looking for. And the last piece I'll just say is I just last week had someone that is not part of the NARM community, and they were telling me that they run a clinic. They hired an intern, and the intern mentioned NARM and said that this book that just came out that she just read this summer was by far, in her early education of being a therapist, the most influential and important book that she had read.
Wow.
Mhm.
And, that just speaks a lot to, I think, what we're developing. And again, I just want to appreciate both Stephanie and Marcia, and also just the whole community here for being part of that.
I would love to add something
Mhm.
to that because it also relates some to my experiences over this year, which is, to me, the book, one of the things that touches me about it the most is that it brings it out to people who otherwise wouldn't have it, not therapists, people in other allied health professions, or just people in therapy. And it's not this thing behind a curtain that we're hiding. And especially with the OBT, the online level 2 training, those students have so wanted to know more. And because they're not therapists, they can't take the level 2 training, and they are so thrilled with the book. And it just, to me, part of what NARM is known for, it's the way it is very inclusive, and it is, we're always looking for what we have in common and how we can appreciate the differences we have with other people, even in the people we have on the podcast. And the students in the training, and Stefanie and I have been in that training. Stefanie's teaching it this year, so it's pretty exciting that I've been able to help her. It's another sidebar from the pandemic where the training I was going to do for San Francisco didn't go, but instead I got to be the co-pilot for Stefanie. And I just wanted to share, one of the students this weekend wrote me, his name is Nicholas Kettles, and he said I could share this. He said, NARM's OBT is outrageously generous in making such a rich body of knowledge and wisdom available to the wider community of helping professionals. NARM's mission goes way beyond growing NARM. It's about transforming human consciousness at its core. Really touched me because the students were just so grateful that we would give this to them, even though they're outside of the therapy community. And I think the book does the same. And that's really wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to shout out also, as we're talking about highlights for this year, is Stefanie teaching the level 1 online basics training solo for the first. Now this is not her first time, but this year was her first time. And just really so proud and excited, Stefanie, to see your own personal and professional development through this process. And maybe there's anything you wanted to share about your trajectory in terms of a teacher. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, it's just a whole different, well, thank you. And I just want to say that this was the first OBT where the book was out, and there were multiple students who were going through the class with the book in hand. And I'm just thinking about one person in particular who was holding the book in the breakout group and going back and forth between the book and the prompts. And, you can really see how people are using the book to support their learning even while in the class. So it's cool to see how all these things come together. Yeah, it's a whole new way of relating to myself and relating to NARM. It's so different. One of the things I've reflected on this year, co-teaching with you, Brad, is very different than teaching on my own. And then I've been reflecting a lot on the fact that teaching a curriculum is very different than mentoring. And so mentoring has come pretty naturally to me. And teaching a curriculum, being a teacher, holding a whole class is definitely the hardest thing I've ever worked toward or on in my life. So there's just been, so much growth that doesn't always, sometimes it comes, in a wonderful way. You've mentored me and supported me just tremendously for years now to become a teacher. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. I'm deeply appreciative of Marcia being with me for the past 2 rounds and having her support and camaraderie and brilliant mind in the mix when we're doing Q&A and stuff. So I feel so well supported by both of you. And it's definitely something that kind of growth has come sometimes in painful ways, running into walls and, being met with criticism or, just learning things. Sometimes we just learn things the hard way. We can't learn them until we, kind of hit the wall. When I get upset, sometimes he thinks it's great because he's like, now you finally understand what I've been talking about, because he's been the only other teacher in the NARM Training Institute other than Larry. And so now sometimes I'll really feel from the inside something that he's been talking about that I could only kind of intellectually or, through kind of some kind of empathy relate to. And then I can relate to it in so much of a deeper way. And then he laughs and he's like, I told you. But sometimes you just have to live it, So there's challenges, there's a lot of personal growth in learning how to show up on a bigger stage. And ultimately, so worth the work, so worth the hours and hours and hours of preparation to be able to play this role. And especially when people are able to really receive it and take it in, like, the quote that Marcia just read from Nicholas, when people are able to really be touched by it, there's really nothing better. So
Yeah. I think it would be important at this point also to appreciate all the training assistants as well. For those of you that have never been part of any of our trainings, it's not just Stephanie or Marcia or myself or Larry. We have a whole team of training assistants. We're really a team. It's not just like the lead trainer and then the training assistants. We're a team and we teach different aspects of the training. The commitment and heartfulness of the training assistants just continues to be so important and touching for us, and the way that most of these people are have a profession, they're therapists, and all of a sudden they're choosing and getting thrown into a very different format where they're now teachers holding groups of people in a complex trauma training that's highly interactive, which means that not only is the material theoretically challenging, but it's also often personally evocative, and people are going through their own transformations like I mentioned before, and the training assistants are holding the space for that. So while we're in the front of the room, holding all of it, the training assistants are also holding a lot of it, and it's just been such an honor. I think I'm speaking for all three of us here to mentor all of these people, including Emily, you, and we really couldn't do this without you, and we wouldn't ever want to do it without you. It's and there's also real humans here where there's conflict, there's misunderstanding, there's diversity challenges, and there's all kinds of just real human things that we get to walk our talk, or at least try to walk our talk every day or every training. And we just want to really honor that it really does take a village to do this. And thanks to each one of you. I know a lot of them listen to this, so thanks to each one of you.
We were reflecting on that too this weekend. The three of us are hot off of training. So, because we finished yesterday, and we were talking about this in one of our team meetings this weekend too, how there's so much that the training assistants are pouring into showing up in these groups. And, when you're a student, you don't necessarily know what goes on behind the scenes and how much, personal challenge and willingness to explore what's going on inside of them, and how much, like you said, Brad, it's a new role for most training assistants, and how much time they're giving up, not just to be there for the weekend, but for all of the meetings and the consultations and the things that they do because they're so passionate about sharing this work and helping other people learn this work. And I don't think it can be said enough how grateful we are to our amazing group of TAs.
That's lovely to hear from your from your side of it. I know for me, in my first, training as a student, I remember, watching the TAs and seeing them taking notes and thinking,
Mhm.
well, they're TAs, like they're still taking notes. And now I get it because there's so many layers that we're learning. It makes so much sense to me. And I remember just being really impacted by that, the modeling that we're all in process and what they really were investing and what I'm now choosing, to invest in as well because it's so meaningful in our lives. So, yeah, it's nice to hear more about from your perspective. Anything else about the learning and the growing edges anyone wants to share?
I kind of want to say one more thing that you just made me think of, Emily. And again, it came up this weekend. It's like a lot of times TAs will say, like you even said it this weekend. You're like, I feel like I never heard that before. I know I heard it before, but I feel like I never heard it before. You were talking about one of the sections and that you even went and checked your notes and you're like, yep, I've heard it all before, you know?
Yep.
And we were reflecting on the fact that, one of the gifts of being a training assistant, hearing the material over and over and over again, is that we're not the same person each time we're hearing it. It's like a moving river, because we're always growing. And there's a lot of growth that happens for students and TAs and teachers, for everybody that's a part of each of these training weekends. And so each time we hear it, we're kind of different in some way. And so, just like that intervention that we sometimes use in NARM, where after there's been a shift, we say, from this place now inside of yourself, what is it like to look back at your intention or, this concern you had or whatever it was? I think a lot of being a TA is kind of that same thing from this place now. How is this material landing? And it's different every time.
Indeed.
I would
Mm.
add a piece to that because you were asking kind of about our own growth. And maybe what I would highlight for myself is around the depth of the significance of of my own kind of capacity to be curious about the subjectivity of my clients and my TAs and my students. There's a quote in the book. It says the NARM relational model supports therapeutic presence by cultivating states of being within two human beings, the therapist and client. And I feel like I grow as much from my interactions with my TAs and my students as they grow. And, to me, one of the greatest learnings, especially being in a role where I'm doing consults and I'm answering questions, is how not to answer the question until I really, really deeply understand what it is. And that, it can feel really good to be smart and know, and, it's gratifying to have an answer that lands. But what I've learned more is that if I actually really get even more curious and sit back and ask more, sometimes it's a very different question from what originally I thought it was. And had I really taken a little more time, I might have actually landed in it differently. And, that the more we do that, the more we can support the client or the student or the TA to actually access their own capacity. So for me, that's been a huge it's an ever deepening process of, oh, there's more there. When they say that, they mean this, or, really the question is this, not what I thought, and to kind of hold back, and less is more.
That's beautiful. Anything else, Brad? I saw you nodding.
A lot of growth in so many different levels. I mean, there's personal growth, there's like the growth around just NARM as a model that's evolving. And Marcia said something before about like these dualities and how do we hold them together. About, I think one of them you used, Marcia, was structure versus fluidity. And that's also, we want to make a shout out to Larry, the creator of NARM, because, many creators of these models, it becomes an ideology, and once you have an ideology, then there's an orthodoxy, right? And it's so interesting in these trainings because people sometimes want it to be an orthodoxy. They want it to be, when this happens, you always do this in NARM. And it's actually quite challenging for some people to realize that it's actually more of a way of being, a way of working than it is simple steps or rules. And that's challenging for a lot of folks to learn. But when we're working intersubjectively with two people who are in the present moment, therapist and client, really understanding how these old patterns are impacting their life now. There's almost 8 billion people on this planet. There is not one size fits all. So we have to create a model that really supports us to be more present and be able to hold the complexity of who this human is that's in front of us and how they're impacting us. And so the ability to continually evolve this model has been a gift. And all three of us have been part of that. And that was part of the book too. If you look back to the original book that introduced NARM over 10 years ago now, the clinical model that we presented in this new book is quite different than what was
Yeah.
roughly sketched out in that first book. We've really built a whole new model in a certain way, and we're still in the middle of that. And there is an integrity and structure of the model. There's core organizing principles that ground the work, but we're able to continually refine, deepen, and evolve the work. And so, in terms of like the thing that I have been really impacted by, since I finished the writing of the book earlier this year, I've been working on taking over the level 3, what we call the NARM Masters Therapist. And Larry has been teaching that, and he's going to be moving on to focus just on the level 4 trainings that he offers. So I'm developing a whole new curriculum based on, Larry's teaching over all these years. And it's challenging me just in a similar way that the book challenged me to really take some incredibly complex theory and bring it into an accessible way that we can train clinicians in it. And I'm really excited about it, and I'm excited to see how NARM continues to deepen and to evolve. And it is a growth challenge, I think, for a lot of us, because a lot of us want something to just be static. And it's like, okay, this is it. Now we know how to do it. Now we're masters at it. And as all of us talk about, we're always in this learning process. Stefanie, Marcia, myself, as teachers in front of the room, we are right there with the training assistants and with the students. And that's what all these notes around my computer are about. It's like, oh, I've taught this for 5 years now, and it just landed in a different way for me. And I want to see if I can capture that and present that next time differently. So that's really the fun part of it, is the creative growth. And again, just wanting to appreciate our community for being open to that. Because again, it's challenging when so much of what we're introduced to and taught about is pretty evidence based and very protocol driven and guideline driven. NARM challenges a lot of that to just really show up as humans and embodying these organizing principles.
I came across a quote from Jung that really touched me and felt so NARM aligned. He said, "Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul." And that's like the R in NARM, like how do we teach these skills? How do we teach that are important and keep that relational piece as sort of so core? It's really a relational healing that we bring in this model.
I love that quote.
As you're all talking, I'm just thinking about how I feel like, well, I'm probably not alone in this, but my life is kind of mirroring what you're talking about, Brad, of like, we can want clarity and we want kind of this orthodoxy and like for things to be super spelled out. And as we realize there's so much nuance, and as we can kind of lean into what flexibility can look like and what can our lives look like when we're not so rigid with things, that there can be a structure, but to have some flexibility in that. And that's really what the model is providing me as I'm continuing to kind of expand into that of like, what does it look like if I don't think I know everything? Can I be curious? Can I be open to, what does it look like to just be in the question and to be instead of do, to just be a human instead of feel like I got to do all these things and have a checklist and then I'm okay. I'm just personally appreciating what all of you are sharing because it's really helping me reflect on my own process just as a human.
Appreciating yours too, Emily.
Thank you, Stephanie. Can we turn to what's coming up? What are the intentions moving forward for 2023?
Well, I think what Brad just shared about the new level 3 curriculum and really coming together as a community to support this, really big. We've had level 3, but the curriculum is going to change and we're all going to be learning together. Like Brad said, he's going to be learning to teach a new curriculum after creating it. We're going to be learning to support it as a team of TAs. And then, students are going to get the gift of learning this new curriculum. I think that for me is the most exciting thing coming up, and the possibility or the probability that a lot of it we're going to get to do in person for the first time in a long time and be together physically. And while doing all of this is pretty exciting. That's what I'm looking forward to the most in 2023.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, we're hoping that we can, get back into person more. I mean, the online trainings just make so much sense for so many people. And we'll continue, of course, offering online trainings at all different levels of our trainings. But we are missing a lot not being together and all the bonding that happens, over the snack table or in these experiences that we get to laugh together in person or go out to dinner at the end of the evening, really connecting in ways that aren't so available online. Although the online trainings, we continue to be amazed at how much happens, heartfulness, transformation, connection. But I think we're all really longing to be back and have some more social engagement. There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to next year. Another piece is, as an institute, we really made this early determination that we weren't going to do anything performative. That was very important. Like, we're not out there doing all this big marketing campaigns, and we haven't even been that involved in research. And there's just a lot of ways we're just trying to really find who we are, what feels authentic to us, so that can be the starting point for then how we show up in the world. And one of the things that, obviously is very important to many people is issues around diversity and inclusion. And we've been working on this from the beginning, the diversity, inclusion, and belonging component. And over these last 5 or 6 years since the Institute's been around, obviously there's been a lot of social challenges and social movements that have been happening, at least in North America, in the United States. And we're really maturing in our clarity around how NARM holds these issues around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. There is a lot of different models and different perspectives. And it goes back to, again, what we were talking about before, at least in the United States, there's a lot of polarization. And we're not just talking kind of politically on the left and right, we're talking within groups.
Mm.
I heard someone recently say they didn't like the word polarization. They like the word fragmentation better, which is probably a better word for what's going on in our society. And so even, trauma training organizations or any organization that's trying to promote social justice or healing efforts, there's a lot of different models and different perspectives. There's unfortunately a lot of infighting and organizations that end up eating themselves in different ways and kind of lose their mission. And so we've really been trying to find a way that from the bottom up, these concepts or this way of living where difference actually becomes the opportunity for deeper connection versus deeper fragmentation. And it's not so easy. And there's a lot of different, again, ways of coming about it. And we've been learning so much. We've had some really great ongoing discussions and self reflections and trainings and meeting with different people and having people on the podcast to talk about different perspectives. And I'm excited about our committees that we've been putting together around this and how this is going to shape everything from the Institute itself to the curriculum to the way we hold trainings to the way that we show up in the world. Again, it's another way that we appreciate all the different people that have been part of the learning process. And the last thing I'll say about it is that, like any relationship, like any system, we are not perfect. There's going to be a lot of mistakes along the way. There has been mistakes and errors and people that have been hurt in different ways. And that one of the things that we're really embodying from understanding attachment, understanding human relationships is that repair after rupture is actually what makes us stronger. And this understanding of really accountability and learning from mistakes, which is quite the opposite of shame and fear, where then everyone gets afraid to be authentic because we're just trying to maintain the relational or community connection. We're trying to really embody what inclusivity and belonging means. And it means that people get to be their full humanness, even when they make all kinds of mistakes that we can all learn together from and grow together from. So I know that's not for everyone, and there's people that, will want more of a model or like we talked about before, more, practical steps. But those people that are part of what we're building, we just again appreciate them and trying to really embody our model and bring that into the relationships that we're part of.
I like what you said about, the idea that whether it's about research or whether it's about marketing or whether it's about our NARM aligned approach to anti bias, that, with the idea that we want to find who we are first. Like your words landed on me there because I immediately started to think about them through the context of the relational model and the idea that that's exactly what we're doing in the model is we have to know where we are first before we can be in relationship in a connected and attuned and open way with somebody else. So it feels inspiring to think about the fact that we are actually walking the walk and approaching these things in a way that's rooted in these organizing principles.
Wonderful. I saw Marcia gave the thumbs up, like, yep. All right. Well, I wondered if there was anything else that, before we close, anything else that feels important to share with our listeners?
I would say for myself, just what an honor it really is. I never would have imagined, forget about 20 years, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would have never imagined. I think Marcia and Stephanie both know this about me. I mean, I have actually a lot of terror about being in front of groups. And here I am, in front of a lot of groups. And I do this because I care about the work. I care about bringing this work to humanity and I care about the people that I'm doing this with. And so there's many days that are challenging for me and scary and overwhelming, but there's also just so much growth and being part of a group of people that want to develop themselves both professionally and personally. I wouldn't trade that for anything. So even though there's lots of challenges along the way, just really want to appreciate everyone that's part of our community. And it really is an honor to be part of the mentorship organization like this, where, as Marcia said, as much as we're mentoring everyone, we're getting so much learning ourselves. And just deeply appreciate that and also appreciate being with these two incredible human beings sometimes we talk more to each other than we do to our spouses. Yeah, we've really developed some very deep relationships that will be life lasting. So thank you to you both.
Yeah, I say it all the time. Thank you to Marcia and to Brad. Obviously, thank you to Larry for creating this model that has brought so many people together and has brought so much growth and transformation into people's lives and healing. Yeah, and I want to say thank you to everybody who listens to Transforming Trauma and who cares about learning about trauma and thinking about the healing of trauma, because just that act, just listening to this and caring about it enough to spend an hour listening and thinking is, in my opinion, you know, contributing, planting seeds to healing the world. And we all know how much the world needs healing right now. So thank you to all of you.
I would just add from a totally personal place that, 10 years ago, we were all sitting in Larry's first NARM training in the US, and I would never have thought we would be here, never.
Right.
And one of the pieces of it that has been so powerful for me is the way in which you, Brad, and Stefanie and Larry have held this kind of, again, a kind of tension with me around pushing me to take on more and do more. And yet at the same time, really respecting who I am and what's right for me. So I've stepped into things. I did the webinar with Larry. I've taken on more things. And I'm also really finding where I like to land and feeling so respected also in that I have a place that works for me, that you continue to push my growth and then also let me land where it's right for me. And I feel like that's true of the whole way the organization runs, and the way we are with our students. But I feel personally super grateful because I know that there are many things that I would never have done if it weren't for the support and encouragement of all of you. So that are just incredibly rich in my life right now. So thank you, both of you, so much.
Well, we'll see each other in a year when we have this conversation in 2023.
All righty.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for showing up with your hearts today and the work that you're doing in the Institute. We also appreciate it. So,
Thank you too.
all right. Well, we'll see y'all next year then.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more about our guest and their work, check the show notes or visit us at narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. Do you want to join the international NARM community in support of trauma-informed care? We are excited to be kicking off trainings in early 2023 designed to support those of you working with clients or populations dealing with the effects of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma. For more information on these trainings and to apply, please visit narmtraining.com/schedule. We hope you will join us in 2023 for learning how to transform trauma. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community, connection with you, and changing the world by transforming trauma.